Hey everybody, this is Country Echoes. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make your own custom clay Vivarium background. So this has been a pretty highly requested video. I get a lot of comments in the comment section asking, can I make a video on how to build a clay background, so I decided to follow through with that today. In this video I'll be showing you the materials you need, how to build, and at the very end I'll be telling you my opinion on these clay backgrounds, whether or not they're worth your time in building. So let's get right into the materials that you'll need to build your own clay Vivarium background. So most importantly, obviously you're going to need your clay material. The type of clay that I use comes from a Special Kitty natural cat litter. I know that sounds kind of silly, but that's what I use. It's an all-natural cat litter, meaning it's 100% clay. There's no extra additives. It absorbs water very well, which I'll tell you why that's important in just a moment. And it's very cost efficient. I think it's under $5 for this 25-pound bag. I've had this big bag for quite a while, so you're obviously going to need some clay. Next, you're going to want some type of eco earth or organic material, some type of dirt to mix in with your clay material. What this is going to do is benefit any plants that you plant into the clay, and it's also going to make it look better and hold together better. So the next thing you're going to need, this is more of an optional. You can make your clay background without any plants or live material, but something that'll make it look tons better and hold humidity better is a type of moss or some type of ivy or pothos, a very hardy plant that won't have any problem rooting into the clay, because clay is pretty dense and it might have a hard time getting through. So something that will vein out and root out on top of the surface of the clay, or something that can root into the clay itself, will be a great plant for your background and make it look all the better. You're going to want to have a hammer. I know it seems strange to have this listed, but it will come in handy. You'll need a container where you'll be mixing and mashing the clay, a container with some water in it, and finally a tank where you'll be putting the clay background into. So we'll start by adding our clay and eco earth mixture. For every 3 scoops of clay, I'll be adding 1 scoop of eco earth to the mix, and then I'll be mixing it together. And I'm going to go to time lapse to show you guys this process. Alright guys, so now that we've gotten the mixing done and the preparation done, we can start to do the mashing part of the process. This is a totally optional part. I have built a background without mashing, but I would recommend doing it. By squishing and mashing the clay, you're going to increase the surface area and the malleability once you add water to the clay itself. So in the long run, it's going to really help you out. It's going to make it ball up a little bit easier, move around in your hands easier. So I just recommend doing it, although it's not totally necessary. So I'm going to kind of show you real quick how I do it. So I get the hammer head right here, the metal head of it, and I just start punching into the clay, trying to grind up all the particles and make them smaller. After doing this for about 10 minutes or so, you should be good to go. Alright guys, so now that we've gotten the clay mashed and we've gotten all the mixing done, we can go directly into adding water to the clay. As you can see, I've already added some water right here. Simply what I'm doing is adding warm water because it will make the clay more malleable, along with mashing it, and adding warm water will be easy to manipulate when you're putting it in the terrarium. So as you can see, I'm just trying to break apart all these particles. All these light gray particles need to become into this dark gray, as you can see here. Should give a close. So all this needs to be evenly mixed. The type of texture you're looking for is where you can simply grab it with your hand and make a ball, or just make a formation with your hand. It stays pretty sticky and it's pretty tacky, but it can be pulled apart easily. Obviously you don't want to lack on water. If you don't have enough water, your clay background is not going to last very long, and it's not going to stick together very well. And if you add too much water, it's going to be much too soupy, and will just fall apart very quickly and won't do well at all. So there's a very fine line between messing up and making it perfect, and you just have to be able to find that line, and as I said before, make the texture to where you can make formations in your hand. I've pretty much gotten the clay to the texture that I want. I might add a little bit more water. As you can see, when I squeeze it, it cracks just a tad, so I'll probably add a little bit more of that warm water and mix it around in there. I added a little bit more coconut fiber, a little bit more dirt. As you can see, some particles in through there, a root right there, just some more organic matter. In the end, it's really going to make your background look better with all these extra particles. It'll just look a lot cooler. So I'll probably add a little bit more water, but as you can see, it's sticky. You can't really tell that from the video, but you'll feel it in your hands, and it holds shape when you squeeze it, and no water's coming out. So that's a pretty good indicator that your clay is in good shape for the background building. All right, guys. So let's go ahead and get into the actual background making process. Alright guys, so I'm going to do a few shots of me just adding the clay to the background in live action, then I'll go ahead and switch to the time-lapse. Before I do that, I want you to notice that when I squeeze the clay, it cracks just a little bit. That's because the cat litter isn't totally fine, and that's just kind of a reminder that if I hadn't done the mashing, it would have cracked a lot more. So what I do is I get a handful of clay, and I start at the bottom, because you have to have a structural base. Something that I went ahead and did was spray the walls, because that's going to make it a little bit more sticky, and the clay will stick to it, and that'll give it some extra moisture so it doesn't crack while you're building. And what I'm going to do is just firmly press that to the side, and I'll smooth it out later on once I get a good base. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to the time lapse, and then you guys can see me build this. Alright guys, so I've completed the actual background itself. As you can see, it's really moist, and there's a big mess on the sides of the tank, as you can see, and on my hands. So what I'm going to be doing next is adding some more eco earth, some more dirt to give it some more color and some more natural appearance, and then adding some moss, and then we'll pretty much be done, besides cleanup, which is definitely something I've got to do. Y'all, so we've pretty much got the background completed. It's looking pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and finish out the Vivarium by adding the drainage layer and the substrate. So it's been about a week since I finished setting up the Vivarium. I made sure that everything took hold well and nicely. I made sure that the ivy and the moss took hold and started growing. Made sure nothing's dying. Made sure that the Vivarium background, the clay, is in good shape. Make sure it's not drying out too quickly. And I also planted some seeds in there for grass. So I've given that time to grow so I can show you the Vivarium and the Vivarium background in completion. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the clay background and the Vivarium that it's in completion, and then I'll give you my honest opinion on clay backgrounds. So here is the completed clay background. As you can see, the moss and the ivy that I rooted into the background is taken off and done really well. Several sprigs of the ivy itself have kind of grown out. Originally when I put it in there, it was just these two pieces and these two volunteer, actually Three pieces and 3 leaves have already grown out, so it's doing really great, and they're growing upright, meaning that they're not dying. As you can see, the moss took hold. It's a super nice bright green. It's doing well under this vivarium light I have it under. The eco earth, as you can see, that I threw onto the clay background really adds a lot of depth and coloration to the background itself. And as you can see, I also added some gravel. I didn't mention that in the video, but obviously it's kind of hard to tell, but I did add it during the time lapse. As you can see, some more moss right there. And down here on the bottom is where I grew all the grass. As you can see, it looks really great, really pretty greens, bright greens. The grass took on really well because this soil that I put in there is super fertile, and it's just done a great job because it stays pretty much constantly moist. That's something I'll get to when I talk about the pros and cons of a clay background. So as you can see, it's just turned out really well. Looks super pretty. It's crawling with microfauna, so I really think this vivarium is going to do really well. Sort of a high humidity rainforest type enclosure. And as you can see, if you look closely, microfauna everywhere. Alright everyone, so now I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons of having a clay vivarium background. So I'm going to start by talking about the pros of having a clay vivarium background. The first pro to having a clay vivarium background is its cost effectiveness. It's very cost effective. There's very little things that need to go into it to create the outcome product. Honestly, you just need to have cat litter and water. You really don't have to have eco earth or any other fancy things. I use sand and gravel and moss. These are all just things I simply have because I have a bunch of other animals. You really don't need all those things, so it's very simple to do, thus making it very cost effective. And the final pro that I've come up with clay vivarium backgrounds is that they're very sustainable of plant life, especially if you're keeping them in a high humidity enclosure. It's going to do a great job at sustaining moss and, like in my terrarium over here, types of ivy or pothos grass even. As you can see, just hardy plants of course, but plants that can root into the clay. They're really going to suck up the moisture from the clay, so it's a great type of background for sustaining plant life, thus making it a really wonderful super humid terrarium background, like for example in a dart frog vivarium. So now I'll start discussing the cons of a clay vivarium background. The primary con that I've encountered with a clay vivarium background is simply that it does dry out quickly and demands a high humidity environment. I have a clay background in three of my animals' enclosures, and all of these animals are from pretty humid areas. They're all from New Caledonia, so I'm trying to maintain a 60 to 75, upwards of 80% humidity range throughout the day. But that's really not even enough for these clay backgrounds. The clay backgrounds, initially they'll hold water for about 2 weeks after you make them, and then they're going to start to dry out, so they require pretty heavy mistings every single day in order to maintain them. They do dry out and start to crack and crumble, and that's really irritating, but I still keep them in my terrariums because they look nice and your animals can lick the water off of it, but they definitely dry out quickly if you don't keep them in a high humidity environment. So, because of that, they'd be great for a dart frog vivarium, but they would not be good for a African fat-tailed gecko enclosure because it would dry out too quickly. So that pretty much wraps up this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. It's been a requested video for quite a while, and I finally got to making it. This is kind of out of my comfort zone, making these types of videos. I don't often do heavy process videos, meaning that I've done a lot of steps and it takes a pretty good amount of time to get to them. If you guys like that, make sure to tell me that in the comment section below, and I'll continue to do some how-to videos that take longer than 30 minutes. This took almost a week, so it's a pretty hefty process. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment, like, and subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you can be notified of my next video. Thank you guys so much for watching this Country Echoes. I'll see you on the next one.